My sister stood up in front of everyone and said I was no longer part of this family, just because I refused to cover her husband's debts. People actually clapped. About an hour later, the restaurant manager came over and said, "Your card didn't go through." They all slowly turned to look at me. I just got up and walked out. Imagine being declared no longer family by your own sister in a crowded restaurant, with your entire extended family applauding her, all because you refused to bail out her gambling addict husband. That's exactly what happened to me. But the real gut punch. That very same night, when their credit card declined and everyone's eyes snapped to me, expecting me to be their savior once again, I just stood up and walked away. Let me tell you how I got to that moment of public humiliation and utter betrayal. My name is Clark, and for the better part of a decade, I was the family's financial safety net. The go-to guy? The ATM. After dropping out of college years ago to care for my sick mother, I poured every ounce of my being into building a successful landscaping business. It started with nothing but determination, a borrowed pickup truck, and calloused hands. While my friends were pulling all-nighters for degrees, I was learning how to run heavy equipment, manage demanding crews, and turn dusty backyards into serene, drought-resistant oases. My company, Green Valley Landscaping, grew from basic lawn care to full-blown landscape design and installation, specializing in sustainable systems that became incredibly popular here in California. By 28, I had 12 full-time employees and contracts with major housing developments. Success wasn't handed to me. It was earned through 16-hour days, endless sacrifices, and an unwavering commitment to quality that consistently brought in new referrals. But that success came with a heavy price. It made me the family's personal bank. When my sister, Amanda, dreamed of a lavish wedding at the Ocean View Country Club, I wrote a check for $15,000 without a second thought. When my cousin Jessica needed money for nursing school after her parents lost their jobs, I covered her tuition for 3 semesters. Uncle Frank's cancer treatment required an experimental therapy not covered by insurance, so I paid the $23,000 in medical bills. And when my dad's auto repair shop struggled during an economic downturn, I quietly transferred money into his business account to keep the doors open and his employees paid. Each time, I told myself, this is what family does. My mom had always instilled in us that blood was thicker than water, that helping family wasn't just an obligation, but a privilege. She died believing our family would always support each other, no matter what. I honored her memory by living that principle, never expecting anything in return, just the comfort of knowing my loved ones were safe and secure. Then, about 3 months ago, everything changed. Amanda showed up at my house on a Tuesday evening, her face streaked with tears. Derek, her husband, had a serious gambling problem. It started small, she said, little bets on basketball, but escalated to high-stakes poker and online sports betting. He owed $47,000 to various creditors, maxed out credit cards, personal loans, even money borrowed from friends who were now demanding repayment. Amanda begged me to help, claiming Derek would lose his job at First National Bank if anyone found out. She painted a picture of a good man who'd just made a few mistakes, deeply ashamed, ready to do whatever it took to make things right. She swore it was a temporary setback, that he'd learned his lesson. But I knew better. I offered to pay for professional gambling addiction treatment instead. There were excellent programs, facilities like Pine Grove Recovery Center, where Derek could get real help. I explained that simply paying off gambling debts without addressing the root addiction would only lead to more gambling, and even bigger debts, down the road. Treatment was the responsible path, the one that would actually solve the problem, not just enable it. Derek reacted with explosive anger. He stormed into my office the very next day, his face red, shouting that he didn't need therapy. He just needed one substantial loan to get even, and then he'd never gamble again. He insisted his gambling was under control, just bad luck that would eventually turn around. He demanded I trust him as family, to stop treating him like a child. When I held firm on treatment, he accused me of being controlling and self-righteous, claiming I used my money to manipulate the family, to make everyone dependent on my approval. He said I enjoyed being the family savior, that I was prolonging his crisis because it made me feel important. His words stung. They twisted my genuine desire to help into something selfish and manipulative. The situation spiraled. My dad stopped returning my calls after Derek convinced him I was being unreasonably stubborn. Jessica, my cousin, started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from once they became successful. Uncle Frank gently suggested I was judging Derek too harshly, reminding me that everyone deserves forgiveness. Amanda, meanwhile, launched a systematic campaign to paint me as selfish and uncaring. She told relatives I was hoarding money while Derek suffered from stress and anxiety. She cherry-picked details about my business success, emphasizing my profits while conveniently ignoring the risks and the backbreaking work involved. She portrayed Derek as a victim of circumstances and me as the heartless one who could easily solve everything but chose not to, out of spite. The pressure reached a boiling point when Amanda announced she was pregnant. She claimed the stress of Derek's debts was affecting her health and potentially harming the baby. Suddenly, my phone was ringing off the hook with family members pleading with me for the sake of your future nephew or niece. They argued that innocent children shouldn't suffer because of adult disagreements, that I had a moral obligation to protect the next generation. Tonight's dinner at Romano's was supposed to celebrate Dad's 62nd birthday, but I suspected it was an ambush. Amanda had insisted we all gather, saying Dad really wanted everyone together, and we needed to work through our differences. I arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, hoping against hope for a peaceful family meal. The restaurant buzzed with happy families, warm lighting, and soft conversation. Our large table in the center dining room held 12 family members, Dad at the head, wearing his favorite blue sweater, a genuine smile that momentarily made me forget the tension. But as the evening wore on, the ambush became undeniable. Family members kept steering conversations toward financial responsibility and family loyalty. Tommy shared a story about helping a neighbor, emphasizing how good it felt to be generous. Jessica gratefully recalled my tuition help, how it changed her life. Each comment felt rehearsed, designed to remind me of my past generosity and my perceived capacity to solve problems. Dad nodded approvingly, his glances at me seeming to say, "Are you listening, son?" Amanda, sitting across from me, occasionally touched her still flat belly, talking about providing a stable home for her child. Derek, meanwhile, was unusually quiet, frequently checking his phone and stepping outside for work-related emergencies. Then, dessert arrived. Amanda stood up, tapped her wine glass with a knife, and asked for everyone's attention. She thanked Dad, praised our close and supportive family. And then, she turned to me. Her face held an expression of disappointment and sadness that could fool anyone who hadn't witnessed her manipulation. Her voice carried across the restaurant. Some people seem to forget that family comes before money. She said it broke her heart to see greed triumph over compassion, especially with a pregnant woman and an unborn child involved. She declared that she could no longer consider someone family if they valued money more than the welfare of their own relatives. Then, looking directly at me, she stated, "Clark, you are no longer part of this family because you refused to help Derek in his time of need. Your selfishness has shown your true character, and I cannot allow such negative influences around my future children." She concluded by saying the family would be better off without someone who pretended to care, but only helped when it was convenient or made him look good. The applause started with Tommy, spreading like wildfire around the table. Jessica clapped, nodding furiously. Uncle Frank shook his head sadly, as if witnessing a tragedy. Even Dad remained silent, neither applauding nor defending me. That silence was the deepest betrayal of all. As I sat there, reeling from the public humiliation, I saw Derek nervously checking his phone, whispering urgently to Amanda. I caught fragments, Monday deadlines, impatient people. Something about his demeanor screamed that this situation was far more complicated and far more dangerous than anyone had let on. Throughout the dinner, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic. He ordered expensive wine bottle after bottle, toasting to family bonds while his hands trembled. He stepped outside multiple times, claiming urgent business calls, but through the restaurant's large windows, I saw him pacing frantically, shouting into his phone, punching the air in frustration. These weren't calm, measured discussions, they were desperate negotiations. During one of his absences, fragments of other family conversations reached my ears. Horrifying truths began to emerge. Jessica quietly confessed to Tommy that she hadn't been in nursing school for 4 months. She'd been working 3 part-time jobs, coffee shop, retail, cleaning, to pay back money she'd borrowed specifically to lend to Derek, thinking it was a short-term, quickly repaid loan. My stomach dropped. Uncle Frank whispered to Dad that he'd taken out a second mortgage on his paid-off house to help Derek, believing Derek's promise of a guaranteed investment opportunity that would double his money. Instead, Derek had gambled away Frank's life savings within 2 weeks, leaving him facing foreclosure on the house he'd lived in for 37 years. It was crushing. Most shocking was learning that Dad's auto repair shop was only 3 weeks away from permanent closure. Derek had convinced Dad to give him complete access to the business checking account, claiming he could invest the shop's profits in high-yield CDs through his banking connections. Instead, he'd systematically drained the account, leaving Dad unable to pay suppliers, employees, or rent. My mom's legacy, my dad's life's work, was being destroyed. Even Amanda hadn't paid her mortgage in 4 months. She was living in constant panic, maxing out credit cards, borrowing against her retirement, even selling her grandmother's jewelry, all to feed Derek's insatiable addiction. His gambling had become completely compulsive. Then I realized the manipulation wasn't just Derek. Tommy admitted to Jessica he'd been providing Derek with detailed information about my business contracts, client payments, equipment purchases. Derek had specifically requested this intelligence gathering, claiming he needed to understand my financial capacity. Tommy thought he was facilitating a family reconciliation. He was actually part of an elaborate scheme to extract money from me. Just as I was processing this, an urgent text buzzed under the table. It was Luis, my business partner. He warned me that Derek had been calling our clients directly, telling them I was experiencing serious financial difficulties and might not complete their projects. 3 major contracts, worth over $60,000, were now in jeopardy. My reputation, built on reliability and trustworthiness, was being actively sabotaged. This wasn't just about money. It was an attack on my integrity. When Derek returned from his latest call, his face was pale, sweaty, his hands shaking as he poured another glass of expensive wine. His conversation grew louder, more inappropriate. Other diners glanced over, concerned. Through his increasingly careless phone calls, I began piecing together the true scope of his debts. The $47,000 Amanda mentioned? Just the tip of the iceberg. He owed money to multiple bookmakers, online sites, and what sounded like less legitimate lending sources, loan sharks, who charged exorbitant interest and used aggressive collection methods. One call revealed he actually owed a staggering $138,000. These were not patient, understanding creditors. The most disturbing revelation came when Derek stepped into the men's room, and I overheard him on a call with someone he addressed as Mr. Castellano. Derek was explaining that he had a family member with substantial assets who would definitely cover the debt by Monday morning. He rattled off specific details about my business, my equipment value, my property, my client contracts, essentially using my success as collateral for his debts without my knowledge or permission. He assured Mr. Castellano that the money was guaranteed because family pressure would force me to pay. He even said tonight's dinner was specifically designed to secure my commitment. He sounded utterly confident that the combination of public pressure, family guilt, and concern for Amanda's pregnancy would leave me no choice. He even laughed while describing how he'd orchestrated the entire evening to manipulate my emotions and force my cooperation. When Derek returned to the table, I noticed Amanda watching him with an expression that wasn't love, but pure fear. Her occasional touches to her belly seemed less like maternal gestures and more like nervous habits. When he leaned over to whisper in her ear, she flinched, nodding quickly, as if agreeing to instructions rather than receiving affection. The ultimate shock came when Amanda excused herself to the restroom, and I followed, genuinely concerned. In the hallway, she broke down. Tears streaming, she confessed that the pregnancy announcement was all Derek's idea, not real. He'd convinced her to fake it as emotional leverage, arguing that family always rallied around expectant mothers. She showed me the fake pregnancy padding she'd been wearing under her loose dress, explaining Derek bought it online and insisted she wear it to family gatherings. She was terrified about what would happen when people expected to see a growing belly, a baby. Derek had just said they'd figure it out once the money was secured. Through her sobs, Amanda revealed Derek had been emotionally and financially abusing her for months. He controlled all their bank accounts, monitored her spending, and threatened to leave her penniless if she refused to help him manipulate our family. He'd even convinced her that his gambling debts were somehow her fault for not being supportive enough of his investment strategies. Then came the pills. Amanda confessed Derek had been giving her pills to help her stay calm during family interactions. She showed me a small bottle he claimed contained herbal supplements for anxiety, but the label looked suspicious, unprofessional. She said they made her feel disconnected, compliant. Derek claimed it was necessary for her to handle the pressure without breaking down. The final piece of his elaborate deception, Amanda admitted Derek knew the owner of Romano's. He'd specifically chosen this location for maximum visibility, arranging our large table in the center to ensure his public capitulation plan was witnessed. He'd even instructed the staff to provide excellent service, expecting a major financial breakthrough. And worst of all, he'd invited a reporter from the local newspaper. He anticipated a touching reconciliation, a heartwarming human interest story about family love, forgiveness, and his redemption. Instead, his meticulously orchestrated plan was about to collapse. While all this was unfolding, discreetly under the table, I'd been researching. A quick search of First National Bank's employee directory showed Derek's name had been removed 2 months ago. Further investigation revealed he'd been terminated for suspicious activity involving customer accounts, potentially facing criminal charges for financial misconduct. He wasn't protecting his job, he was covering up a crime. The full, devastating truth about my family's financial collapse became sickeningly clear. Dad's auto shop didn't struggle due to the economy. Derek systematically stole from it. Jessica wasn't in nursing school. She'd been forced to withdraw because Derek never repaid the money she lent him. Uncle Frank faced foreclosure because he trusted Derek's fraudulent investment scheme, losing his home and life savings at 72. Derek's phone calls throughout the evening painted an even darker picture. He owed dangerous loan sharks, some he called Mr. Torino, who were not just impatient, but threatening. And he'd used my name and my business as collateral, telling them I'd verbally agreed to pay. That tonight was just a formality. He had put me, my business, and my safety directly in harm's way. This wasn't just emotional blackmail. It was criminal fraud and extortion. Then the pills Amanda showed me. I quickly looked them up online. Not herbal supplements. Prescription sedatives. Powerful ones. Used for severe psychiatric conditions. He was drugging her to keep her compliant. He had systematically lied to everyone about everything. His job, his debts, his addiction, his relationship with Amanda, her pregnancy. This was an elaborate, cynical web of manipulation. As the evening wound down, the waiter approached with the bill. $847. Derek had ordered it all. Expensive appetizers, premium wine, multiple desserts, assuming I'd pay, as always. Derek made a show of reaching for his wallet, then pushed the bill to Amanda. Amanda fumbled through her purse, feigning surprise, pulling out her credit card, hoping they had enough. It was a rehearsed performance. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned, apologetic. Amanda's card declined. She feigned embarrassment, claiming she thought Derek had made a deposit. Derek then offered his card. Declined. Over the limit. Dad offered his. Declined. Maxed out from Derek's emergencies. Uncle Frank, Jessica, Tommy, all couldn't contribute. The awkward silence stretched. Every single eye at the table turned to me. Expectant. Tommy joked about me being the financial hero. Jessica praised my generosity. Even the waiter looked my way, clearly briefed by Derek. Derek, his face twitching with desperation, began his appeals. Family always helps family, moral obligations, especially for a birthday. Amanda joined, referencing her pregnancy, the stress, the baby's health. Dad remained silent, his passive acceptance feeling like another betrayal. The tension was unbearable. Other diners were staring. Derek's desperation grew. He made veiled threats about consequences for those who abandoned family. It was in that moment of absolute clarity that I saw the pattern. My generosity, my enabling, had created this monster. It had prevented them from learning, from facing consequences. Amanda made one final, tearful plea. The house, the baby, our childhood memories, what Mom would want. Derek, losing control, stood up, shouting about my selfishness, my cruelty toward his pregnant wife and elderly father. claiming my money had corrupted my moral compass. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I calmly informed the table that I would not be paying for their expensive dinner, nor Derek's gambling debts. Instead, I offered one final alternative. I would gladly pay for Derek's admission to a professional gambling addiction treatment program, and I would help family members create realistic payment plans with their creditors. But I would not simply hand over money that would be gambled away. Derek's reaction was explosive. In his rage, he accidentally revealed he had been recording our entire conversation on his smartphone, positioned strategically on the table. He'd planned to use my words as evidence in a lawsuit, claiming I had verbally agreed to pay his debts and was now breaching an oral contract. The entire evening wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was legal extortion. The revelation shocked everyone, even my family members who didn't know about his recording scheme. It showed a level of premeditation that went far beyond desperate addiction. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my chair scraping against the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. My family stared, not expecting this. Derek's face went ashen as he realized his secretly recorded evidence wouldn't support his planned lawsuit because I had never agreed to pay his debts. In a calm but firm voice that carried across the restaurant, I addressed everyone. Real love sometimes requires saying no to destructive behavior, I said, even when that decision causes temporary pain. Enabling an addiction by paying debts without treatment isn't kindness. It's participation in self-destruction. I told them about the 8 years I'd spent supporting this family, believing my generosity built better lives. Instead, I stated, my well-intentioned assistance created a cycle of dependency, where family members made increasingly irresponsible decisions, knowing I would ultimately pay for their mistakes. Derek's recording device, I pointed out, was the perfect example of how manipulation had spiraled into calculated fraud and criminal extortion. I explained his plan to use secretly recorded conversations as evidence in a lawsuit based on false claims. Then, the fake pregnancy. Audible gasps swept through nearby tables as I gently, but clearly, explained how Derek convinced Amanda to wear artificial padding and lie about expecting a child to manipulate my emotions. Amanda looked down, shamed, unable to deny it. I detailed Derek's systematic theft from Dad's auto repair shop, his lies about his job, and the true extent of his debts. Over $130,000, not the $47,000 claimed. Family members began to grasp the depth of his manipulation, not just of me, but of all of them. Speaking directly to the newspaper reporter Derek had invited, I said, "This story isn't about reconciliation. It's about the dangers of enabling addiction and the importance of healthy boundaries." I offered him a detailed interview about financial abuse within families and the psychological tactics used by addicts. Dad finally broke his silence, apologizing. He admitted knowing about some of Derek's lies, but feeling powerless, fearing he'd lose Amanda and his future grandchild. He regretted prioritizing harmony over honesty, acknowledging his silence had enabled Derek. Jessica, tearfully, confessed Derek threatened to destroy her credit if she didn't help him gather information on my business. He promised to pay her student loans if I covered his gambling debts. Uncle Frank admitted Derek systematically borrowed from him for months, promising guaranteed investments that never materialized, now losing his life savings and home. Tommy, guilt etched on his face, finally understood his role in Derek's manipulation. Before walking out, I clearly stated my new boundaries. I will gladly help family members who genuinely want to improve their lives through education, treatment, or legitimate business planning. But I will never again enable addiction or pay for the consequences of irresponsible financial decisions. I left my business card. You can contact me when you're ready for real help, not just money. Genuine assistance means supporting your efforts to solve problems, not solving them for you while you repeat the same mistakes. Derek became unhinged, threatening to sue me for abandonment, defamation, breach of family obligations. He tried to convince others I was the villain. His desperation was disturbing. Restaurant security approached as his behavior became disruptive. As I walked toward the exit, Amanda suddenly collapsed, convulsing. It was a medical emergency. The pills Derek had been giving her were powerful sedatives, dangerously combined with alcohol. Her medical crisis was stark evidence of Derek's willingness to drug and abuse family members to maintain control. His panicked attempt to dispose of the pill bottle To deny involvement screamed guilt. The reporter's story just got a whole lot darker: domestic abuse, addiction, fraud, criminal behavior. Paramedics arrived quickly. They confirmed sedatives and alcohol, a potentially lethal combination requiring immediate hospitalization. Police arrived. Detective Martinez questioned Derek, who became a person of interest in a potential poisoning investigation. Once the sedatives wore off and Amanda regained consciousness, she revealed everything. Free from the chemical influence, she described months of manipulation, threats, and coercion. The fake pregnancy, the financial abuse, the drugs, all of it. Police realized Derek faced charges not just for drugging Amanda, but for fraud, for using my name and business as collateral with dangerous criminals. With Derek in custody, our family finally began to assess the true extent of the damage. Dad's auto repair shop could be saved through debt restructuring and new business planning. Jessica learned she could return to nursing school through legitimate financial aid programs. Uncle Frank, with financial counseling, found options to prevent full foreclosure. Louise called to report that our clients, once they understood Derek's calls were part of a criminal scheme, actually expressed increased confidence in my integrity. Several offered additional projects, impressed by how I'd handled the crisis with honesty and ethical boundaries. The newspaper reporter's investigation revealed Derek's patterns were common among serious gambling addicts. His article would help other families recognize warning signs. Derek's former employer confirmed his termination for banking misconduct, leading to potential federal charges. 3 weeks later, police arrested several of Derek's loan shark creditors, shutting down criminal organizations that had preyed on vulnerable people. Amanda filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order. Finally free, she began attending support groups for families affected by gambling addiction, slowly rebuilding her emotional and financial independence. Dad's auto repair shop reopened under a new business plan, with proper financial controls. He hired a professional bookkeeper and established transparent banking relationships. He and I rebuilt our relationship through honest conversations, acknowledging that my tough love had ultimately saved his business. Jessica returned to nursing school, graduated with honors, and now works in an emergency department. She paid me back every dollar, though I told her it wasn't necessary. It was important for her own integrity. Uncle Frank kept his house through a mortgage modification and now volunteers, helping other seniors avoid financial scams. My landscaping business expanded significantly. My reputation for integrity attracted new clients. Luis and I opened a second office, employing 22 full-time workers, with contracts with municipal governments, schools, and healthcare facilities. I became an advocate, speaking at community centers, helping other families recognize manipulation and set boundaries. So many stories mirrored my own. I facilitate support groups, emphasizing that true love sometimes means refusing to rescue people, allowing them to experience the discomfort necessary for genuine change. Amanda attends these groups, sharing her story of recovery from both abuse and the enabling behaviors that allowed Derek's manipulation to continue. The newspaper article about our family won a state journalism award. Derek will face deportation after prison. 1 year later, I can honestly say walking out of Romano's that night was the most difficult, but necessary, decision I'd ever made. The immediate aftermath was painful, chaotic, but it ultimately freed everyone from the destructive cycle of enabling and manipulation. Derek is serving a 3-year sentence, attending mandatory addiction treatment. His letters initially continued the manipulation, but our family learned to stop responding. Amanda's recovery has been remarkable. She's now a dental hygienist, genuinely pregnant, expecting a daughter with Michael, a respiratory therapist she met in her support group. Our relationship is stronger than ever, based on honesty and mutual respect. I'm honored to be her daughter's godfather. Dad's shop is thriving. He's grateful I forced him to confront realities. Jessica is a successful nurse. Uncle Frank helps others. My business is flourishing. The most important lesson? Boundaries aren't walls that separate people. They're bridges that connect them in healthy, sustainable ways. When I stopped enabling, I created opportunities for genuine relationships, for mutual respect and accountability. True family love means supporting growth and independence, not preventing people from experiencing the consequences that teach important life lessons. My refusal saved my family from years of additional abuse, forcing everyone to develop real problem-solving skills and emotional resilience. Amanda's daughter will grow up in a family built on honesty, accountability, and genuine support for healthy choices. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your financial security to enable their poor choices? How would you handle pressure from relatives who believe your success obligates you to rescue them from problems they created themselves? I'd love to hear your thoughts about setting boundaries with family members who struggle with addiction or financial irresponsibility. Please like this story if it helped you think differently about family obligations and enabling behavior. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming manipulation and building healthy relationships. Share this with anyone facing similar family pressure, and comment below with your own experiences or questions. Thank you for listening. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their destructive choices, even when that decision causes temporary pain and conflict. Your boundaries protect not just your well-being, but create opportunities for others to develop the strength they need for genuine recovery and independence. May you find the courage to make difficult but necessary decisions when loyalty conflicts with enabling behavior, and may your relationships be built on respect and accountability.